All right, in my hands, brand new at this hour, bombshell revelations from the Grassley-Graham memo. Major parts, this is the memo from yesterday, have now been unredacted. Huge parts yesterday. Now the memo is providing further evidence that the FISA court was lied to by the FBI in order to get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. And there's new information that Christopher Steele may have lied to the FBI about briefing media outlets. There's a lot to cover. We're going to go through it slowly. We'll do it together. Now, the memo starts with this. This is page 1 of the memo right here. On the face, the dossier, it appears that Mr. Steele gathered much of his information from Russian government sources inside of Russia. And according to the law firm Perkins Coie, Mr. Steele's dossier-related efforts were funded through Fusion GPS by that law firm on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. Let's pause here. Hillary Clinton is paying Steele to spread Russian lies and Russian propaganda. I'll read it again because this is important. Much of the information from Russian government sources inside of Russia. Isn't that what the media has been investigating for the better part of a year here? Oh, so keep that in mind as we move forward. Here's another key portion. It appears that either Mr. Steele lied to the FBI or to the British court that the classified documents reviewed by the committee contain materially false statements. And then the memo goes on to read, in response to the committee's inquiries, the chairman and ranking member received a briefing March 15, 2017, from then Director James Comey. Then the memo goes on to say that briefing addressed the Russia investigation, the FBI's relationship with Mr. Steele, and the FBI's reliance on Mr. Steele's dossier in 2 applications that it filed for surveillance under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Then, March 17th, 2017, the chairman and ranking member were provided copies of the 2 relevant FISA applications which requested authority to conduct surveillance of Carter Page. Both relied heavily on Mr. Steele's dossier claims, and both applications were granted by the Foreign Intelligence Court. In December 2017, the chairman, ranking member, and subcommittee chairman Graham were allowed to review a total of 4 FISA applications relying on the dossier to seek surveillance of Mr. Carter Page, as well as numerous other FBI documents related to Mr. Steele. Now, the next paragraph, this is interesting. This is highly redacted here. I wonder what's in that. Then the following paragraph, follow along. Similarly, in June of 2017, the former FBI Director Comey testified publicly before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence that he had briefed President-elect Trump on the dossier's allegations in January, when he was president-elect, just before he was sworn into office, January 2017, which Mr. Comey described to then President-elect Trump as salacious and unverified. When asked at the March 2017 briefing why the FBI then relied on the dossier in the FISA applications, absent meaningful corroboration, and in the light of the highly political motives surrounding its creation, then Director Comey stated that the FBI included the dossier allegations about Carter Page in the FISA applications because Mr. Steele himself was considered reliable due to his past work with the FBI. Now, later on that page, memo reads, it goes, the bulk, pay close attention, the bulk of the FISA application, put that back up on the screen, consists of allegations against Page that were disclosed to the FBI by Mr. Steele and also outlined in the Steele dossier. The application appears to contain no additional information corroborating the dossier allegations against Mr. Page, although it does cite to a news article that appears to be sourced to Mr. Steele's dossier as well. Let's just stop right here. The entire bulk of the FISA application came from the dossier. This dossier, well, they're relying on a guy that was being paid for by the Clinton campaign and by the DNC, funneling the money. Fusion GPS got the money through the law firm both the DNC and the Clinton campaign used. There was no verification of any of this. It was just based on the dossier. And the fact that they say, well, he was reliable in the past. And then imagine this. In October, when they filed for the first application for FISA against the Trump campaign. Well, 3 months later in January, James Comey is saying that it's salacious and unverified. So why 3 months earlier did they go before a FISA court and present it as the bulk of evidence? Do you see where we're going here? Now, here's what page 3 of this memo says. Redacted. The FBI discussed the reliability of the unverified information provided by Mr. Steele in footnotes 8 and 18 of the FISA warrant application. First, the FBI noted a vaguely limited extent the political origins of the dossier. Stop right there. They knew it was funded by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. They never told the FISA court that important piece of information. I think the FISA court probably would have made a big impression, considering this is the bulk of their case, the dossier, if it was coming from one campaign against another campaign in the lead up to an election. Now, in footnote 8, the FBI stated the dossier information was compiled pursuant to the direction of a law firm who had hired an identified U.S. person, now known as Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS, then redacted. The application failed to disclose that the identities of Mr. Simpson's ultimate clients were the Clinton campaign and the DNC. Why would the FBI, in making a FISA application against an opposition party in an election year and knowing it's paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, why would they not tell the FISA court judge? That, to me, is a serious omission, and one that states there's a political motive behind all of this. Now, let's just go back a little further. Remember, this is the same James Comey, this is the same FBI that, in fact, in spite of a mountain of evidence that Hillary Clinton mishandled classified information, destroyed and deleted 33,000 subpoenaed emails, and then used acid wash, and then bleach bit, and then busted up, different devices with hammers. The same people that kept her in the race are now working on her behalf again, and they're doing it in this case by not telling the full truth to the FISA court. We continue. The FBI stated to the FISA court that based on Steele's previous reporting and history with the FBI, whereby Steele provided reliable information to the FBI believes Steele's reporting to be credible. In short, it appears the FBI relied on admittedly uncorroborated information funded by and obtained for Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign in order to conduct surveillance of an associate of an opposing presidential candidate. It did. This is right here in this, right here. It did so based on Mr. Steele's personal credibility and presumably having faith in his process of obtaining information. Wow. They didn't tell the court any of this. They didn't tell the court where the money came from. They didn't tell the court. They also knew at that time that Steele hated Trump because Steele mentioned it to Bruce Orr. We'll get to that in a minute. But there is substantial evidence suggesting that Mr. Steele materially misled the FBI about a key aspect of his dossier efforts, one which bears on his credibility. And it starts redacted. Yet the FISA applications note the existence of a news article dated September 23rd, 2016, which in particular contained some of the same dossier information about Mr. Page compiled by Mr. Steele, on which the FBI relied in its application. While not explicitly stated, this is presumably the article written by Michael Isikoff, Yahoo News, titled U.S. Intel Officials Probe Ties Between Trump Advisor and Kremlin. Now, redacted, the application attempts to explain away the inconsistency between Steele's assertion to the FBI and the existence of the article, apparently to shield Mr. Steele's credibility, on which it still relied for the renewal request of the FISA application. You got to renew it every 90 days. And it said, given that the information contained in the September 23rd news article generally matches the information about Page that Steele discovered doing her research, redacted. Now, stop for a second. So they used the same information from the same person. They presented to the court like they're two separate but yet corroborating pieces of information to put emphasis to the court. Oh, see, we've got two sources. The only problem is the source of the Yahoo News article was the same source of the dossier, is the same guy that didn't want Trump to win, and is the same guy that was being paid by the Clinton campaign. This is so corrupt. And here's what's on page 4. Got it right here. All of this right here. In footnote 9 of its January 2017 application, this is the first renewal of the FISA warrant. In this case, for Mr. Page, the FBI again addressed Mr. Steele's credibility. This is 3 months later. Remember, that's the same January where James Comey told President Trump it's salacious and it's unverified. So that same month, they go in for a renewal. Back to the document. The FBI noted that it had suspended their relationship with Mr. Steele in October of 2016 because of Steele's, quote, unauthorized disclosure of information to the press. Now, the FBI relayed that Steele had been bothered by the FBI's notification to Congress in October of 2016 about the reopening of the Clinton investigation. Remember, that happened just before the election. And as a result, Steele independently and against prior admonishment from the FBI to speak with only the FBI on this matter, released the reporting discussed herein, dossier allegations against Page to an identified news organization. However, the FBI continued to still cite Mr. Steele's past work as evidence 3 months later of his reliability. At the same time, they're telling Donald Trump it's unverified, it's salacious. And that incident that led to the FBI suspending their relationship with Mr. Steele occurred after Steele provided the FBI with the dossier information described in the application. Now, the FBI further asserted in footnote 19 that it did not believe that Steele directly gave information to Yahoo News that published the September 23rd news article. Now, in the next paragraph, this is what it reads. In defending Mr. Steele's credibility to the FISA court, the FBI had posted an innocuous explanation for the September 23rd article based on the assumption that Mr. Steele had told the FBI the truth about his press contacts, and the FBI then vouched for him twice more, using the same rationale in subsequent renewal applications, filed with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in April and in June of 2017. Now, here's the important part of page 5. The first of these filings was publicly reported in the U.S. media in April of 2017. Yet, the FBI did not subsequently disclose to the FISA court the evidence suggesting that Steele had lied to the FBI. Instead, the application still relied primarily, remember, the bulk of the application is the phony Clinton bought and paid for dossier. Go back, just scroll down just a hair back the other way. The bulk of the application. So instead, the application still, we're now 6 months into this thing, relied on his credibility, even though the FBI knew he was not credible at this point, especially as it relates to the media incident, which pushed him out of the FBI's way in October, the same month the first FISA warrant was granted. Now, here's what's on page 6. Whether Mr. Steele lied to the FBI about his media contacts is relevant for at least two reasons. First, it's relevant to his credibility as a source, particularly given the lack of corroboration for his claims, at least at the time they were included in the FISA applications. Second, it is relevant to the reliability of his information-gathering efforts. Mr. Steele conducted his work for Fusion GPS, compiling the pre-election memoranda between June and early November 2016. Now, there was this British litigation. This talks about it in the Grassley and Graham memo here tonight. Mr. Steele acknowledged briefing journalists about the dossier memorandum in late summer, autumn 2016. Yeah, he was the source for Isikoff. Now, unsurprisingly, during the summer of 2016, reports of at least some of the dossier allegations began to circulating among reporters and people involved in Russia issues. Mr. Steele also admitted in the British litigation to briefing journalists from the Washington Post, Yahoo News, The New Yorker, the whole network, fake news, CNN, in September of 2016. Simply put, The more people who contemporaneously knew that Mr. Steele was compiling his dossier, the more likely it was vulnerable to manipulation. In fact, in the British litigation, which involves a post-election dossier memorandum, Steele admitted he had received and included in unsolicited, unverified allegations. That filing implies that he similarly received unsolicited intelligence on these matters prior to the election as well, stating that Mr. Steele continued to receive unsolicited intelligence, now pay close attention, on matters covered by the pre-election memorandum after the U.S. presidential election. Now, the next paragraph's redacted. It goes on. One memorandum by Mr. Steele that was not published by BuzzFeed is dated October 19, 2016. The report alleges, redacted as well, redacted, Mr. Steele's memorandum states that his company received this report, redacted, U.S. State Department, that the report was the second in a series, and that the report, pay close attention, was information that came from a foreign subsource who is in touch with, redacted, a contact of, redacted, a friend of the Clintons who passed it to, redacted. I love the redacteds here. It is troubling enough the Clinton campaign funded Steele's work, but that now Clinton associates, as we reported last night, were contemporaneously feeding Mr. Steele allegations. This raises additional concern about his credibility. Let's head to page 7. These facts appear to directly contradict the FBI's assertions in its initial application in October of 2016 for the FISA warrant, as well as subsequent renewal applications. The FBI repeatedly represented to the FISA court that Mr. Steele told the FBI he did not have unauthorized contacts with the press about the dossier prior to October 2016. That's false. The FISA applications make these claims specifically in the context of the September 2016 Yahoo News article, but Mr. Steele has admitted publicly before a court of law that he did have such contacts with the press at this time, and his former business partner, Mr. Simpson, had confirmed it to the committee. Thus, the FISA applications are either materially false in claiming that Mr. Steele said he did not provide dossier information to the press prior to October 2016, or Mr. Steele made materially false statements to the FBI when he claimed he only provided the dossier information to his business partner in the FBI. And page 7 continues. In this case, Steele's apparent deception seems to have posed significant material consequences on the FBI's investigative decision and representations to the FISA court. And Steele's information formed a significant portion of the FBI warrant application. FISA application relied more heavily on Steele's credibility than on any independent verification or corroboration for his claims. Thus, the basis for the warrant authorizing surveillance on a U.S. citizen largely rests on Mr. Steele's credibility. And the Department of Justice has a responsibility to determine whether Mr. Steele provided false information to the FBI and whether the FBI's representations to the court were in error.